My name is Ethan Walker, and I'm 29 years old. On paper, I'm a financial analyst living in Omaha, Nebraska, a place where time moves slower and people still wave to each other from their porches. But for most of my life, I've felt like a stranger in this town, and worse, a stranger in my own family. I wasn't born into the family that raised me. I was adopted as a baby, barely a few months old. But unlike the heartfelt stories you sometimes hear about adopted children finding unconditional love, my experience was different. Cold, distant and transactional. Robert and Elaine, my adoptive parents, were well-to-do and respected in the suburbs. They had a picture-perfect house with a manicured lawn, white picket fence, and a black SUV in the driveway. Their biological kids, Eric and Sophie, were the golden children, their pride and joy. And me, I was always introduced as Nathan, never our son, just Nathan, as if I came with a warning label. I used to think I could earn their love. I got straight A's, brought home school trophies, kept my room spotless, helped with chores no one asked me to do. But no matter what I achieved, my victories were met with indifference. A brief nod from Elaine, a distracted good from Robert. The warmth I longed for was always just out of reach. One Christmas when I was 7, the whole family gathered in front of the tree for a photo. I tried to squeeze in beside them, smiling wide, but Sophie pushed me away. "You're not part of this," she said, her voice sharp. Elaine didn't say a word. She just adjusted Sophie's curls and kept taking pictures, as if I wasn't even there. Moments like that stick with you. They dig deep into your soul. But there was one person who made me feel human, someone who looked at me like I mattered. My grandfather, Henry. He lived 2 hours outside the city on a quiet little farm where the stars shone brighter and the world moved slower. Every summer I'd stay with him, and those were the only weeks of the year I truly felt alive. He called me kiddo, taught me how to fix engines and strum folk songs on his old wooden guitar. We'd sit on the porch watching sunsets bleed into the cornfields, and for a few brief weeks I wasn't Nathan the outsider, I was just loved. I remember one evening I was about 12. We were sitting on the swing, a soft breeze drifting through the fields. I turned to him and asked the question that had been eating at me for years. Why don't Mum and Dad love me? He didn't answer right away, just placed a firm hand on my shoulder and said in a low, steady voice, "Some people don't know how to value the gift they've been given, but that doesn't make you any less valuable, you hear me, kiddo?" I nodded, but deep inside I wondered, would anyone ever truly choose me? Returning home from Grandpa Henry's farm every summer was like stepping back into a world made of glass, beautiful on the outside, but cold, hollow, and ready to shatter with the slightest touch. Back in Omaha, the Bennett household was pristine. Every object had a place, every rug, every dish, every curtain was just as Elaine liked it, perfect, except somehow I was always out of place. Caleb had trophies lined up on his bedroom shelf from Little League, and Ava had a mural of her ballet achievements displayed proudly in the hallway. But there was never a space for me. No pictures of my spelling bee win, no proud mention of my science fair trophies. It was as if I were invisible, living quietly in a corner of their curated lives. My room was in the attic, not the cozy kind of attic you see in movies. Mine had a slanted ceiling, a single narrow window, and a floor that creaked with every step. The furniture didn't match. The desk lamp flickered constantly, and while Caleb and Ava had walls covered in color and personality, my room had only silence. Still, I told myself, if I tried hard enough, maybe they'd come around. I did everything I could. I folded laundry exactly how Elaine liked it, helped Robert clean the garage without being asked, made straight A's, but the most I got in return was a brief nod or an offhand. "You're supposed to do those things." What hurt most wasn't the coldness, it was the obligation in their voices, as if raising me was a duty they had to check off a list. One night I overheard Elaine talking in the kitchen. I had come down for a glass of water and paused outside the doorway. "He only behaves because he knows he owes us," she said to Robert. "We saved him from God knows what. He should be thankful." That sentence landed like a punch to the gut. I crept back upstairs, climbed into my narrow bed, and stared at the ceiling for hours. I wasn't a son. I was a burden they were waiting to unload. Caleb never missed a chance to remind me I didn't belong. He called me the leftover when he thought no one was listening. Sophie. She was subtler, more polished in her distance. She never bullied me, but her eyes always carried that same message. You don't belong here. The only light in those dark years was Grandpa Henry. I counted the days until summer, when I could return to his farm, the only place that ever felt like home. On those warm July evenings, he'd sit with me under the stars and tell me stories from his youth. Sometimes he'd pause mid-story, glance at me and say something cryptic like, "One day you'll understand everything, Ethan, just hold on." I never knew what he meant back then. I thought maybe he was just trying to cheer me up, but now, looking back, I think he was preparing me. When I turned 18, I thought maybe, just maybe, things would change, that once I was no longer a responsibility, my foster parents would see me differently. Maybe they'd even be proud. I was accepted to the University of Iowa on a full academic scholarship finance major, just like Robert. It felt like the first real step toward defining who I wanted to be, separate from the shadows of that house. I packed my things in silence. No family dinner, no hugs, just a dry good luck from Elaine and a nod from Robert that might have been a goodbye or indigestion, hard to tell with him. As I stood by the front door, suitcase in hand, I looked at them one last time, my so-called family. "Thank you for everything," I said. They didn't respond. Ava barely looked up from her phone. I closed the door behind me without waiting for a reply. College was a breath of fresh air. For the first time in my life, no one saw me as the adopted kid. I was just Ethan, a student who was good at numbers, great at spreadsheets, and terrible at small talk. I worked 2 part-time jobs, pulled all-nighters studying, and rented the cheapest apartment I could find near campus. I sent holiday cards home, updates about my grades, even small gifts. They replied a few times. Cold emails, thanks or good job. But it was Grandpa Henry who kept me going. He called me every Sunday like clockwork. Sometimes we talked about stocks and bonds, other times just the weather and tomatoes. But no matter what, he always ended the call with, "You're doing good, kiddo. I'm proud of you." By the time I graduated top of my class, I had 1 seat saved at the commencement ceremony, just one, and there he was, Grandpa, wearing his old suit, tie slightly crooked, eyes beaming with pride. When I stepped off that stage, diploma in hand, he hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Told you the world was wrong about you," he whispered. I smiled, but behind that smile, something still ached. A deep, silent ache that no amount of grades or accomplishments could fix. After graduation, I got a job offer in Omaha. I knew it might sound strange, going back to the city where I felt most alone, but I wanted to stay close to Grandpa. I couldn't say it out loud, but part of me also hoped that maybe with time, the Bennetts would finally see me. Spoiler alert, they didn't, but I kept sending birthday cards, Christmas money. I even helped Caleb once when he got into financial trouble. Ava called twice when she needed help applying for a job. I helped her write her resume, but not once did they say thank you. Still, I kept hoping. It was my 6th year back in Omaha, working as a senior analyst at a mid-sized investment firm. I had a decent apartment downtown, a stable job, and a daily routine that kept me busy enough not to think too much. But beneath all the stability was a question that kept resurfacing. Would they ever choose me if they didn't have to? Thanksgiving was approaching. For most, it's a time of warmth, family, and shared memories. For me, it had always been a cold reminder of where I didn't belong. But that year, I had an idea, one I poured all my hope into. What if I hosted Thanksgiving? What if I created something so thoughtful, so sincere they couldn't ignore it? Maybe then they'd finally see me. I reserved a table for 6 at a beautiful, intimate restaurant downtown. It had soft lighting, rich wood accents, white linen napkins, the kind of place where you'd expect to see smiling families toasting with wine and holding hands across the table. I planned everything down to the last detail: roast turkey with garlic herb butter, mashed potatoes whipped to perfection, pumpkin pie just the way Elaine liked it. I even handwrote the invitations, one for each of them, not emailed, not texted, actual stationery, sealed in gold envelopes. "Dear Mum, Dad, Caleb, Ava, I'd be honored if you joined me for Thanksgiving dinner. I want to make a memory together, one that feels like family. Love, Ethan." I mailed the letters a week in advance, followed up with gentle text messages. Got no replies, but I held on to hope. Thanksgiving Day came. I arrived early, dressed in my best navy blue suit. The hostess led me to the private table I'd reserved, right by the window. 6 chairs, candles flickering. The table looked like something out of a magazine. I sat down at 5 p.m., smoothing out my tie and checking my phone. Nothing. 5:15, still nothing. Families poured in around me, laughing, hugging, filling the room with noise and joy. I watched a couple hold hands while their child twirled a napkin over her head like a helicopter. An older man toasted his wife, whispering something that made her giggle. I glanced again at the empty seats around me. 5:30, no calls, no messages. At 6 p.m. I dialed Elaine's number. She picked up on the fourth ring. "Hello? Hey Mom, just wanted to check in. I'm here at the restaurant. Are you guys on your way?" There was a pause, then her voice, cool as ever. "Oh, we're not coming, Ethan. Your father's not feeling well. We already had dinner here. I'm sure you'll manage." I heard clinking dishes in the background, laughter, Ava's voice, Caleb shouting something about a football game. They were together, without me. Again, I stared at the table. The 6 perfect place settings now felt like a cruel joke. The flickering candles mocked me with their warmth. The waitress came by and tilted her head gently. "Are you still expecting guests?" I swallowed hard. "No," I said, forcing a smile. "Just bring me the turkey. 1 plate. Just you tonight?" "Yeah, just me." She brought the food. The aromas filled the air, everything I'd chosen to make them feel at home. I cut a slice of turkey, but every bite stuck in my throat like gravel. I looked around at the happy families, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something snap. I wasn't angry. I was done. I was halfway through my solitary dinner, the untouched pie still warm in front of me, when the restaurant door creaked open. A gust of cold air swept through, sending a chill down my spine. I didn't bother looking up until I heard the familiar sound of a cane tapping against the hardwood floor. Then I heard his voice. "Sorry I'm late, kiddo." I turned, and there he was, Grandpa Henry, wearing that old wool coat he'd had since I was 10, his silver hair a little thinner, his steps a little slower, but those same gentle eyes fixed right on me. He walked over and pulled out a chair with a tired grunt. "Traffic was a nightmare," he joked, "but I wasn't about to let you eat alone on Thanksgiving." I didn't even try to hide the tears. "I thought you weren't coming either." "Ethan," he said, reaching for my hand across the table, "I've missed a lot of things in my life, but I swore I'd never miss you." He sat down, his hand trembling slightly as he picked up a fork. Then he looked around the empty seats and back at me. "Let me guess, they didn't show." I nodded, unable to speak. "They never deserved you," he said, his voice low and steady. The rest of the restaurant faded into background noise. Just me and Grandpa, sharing turkey and mashed potatoes like we had back in the summers on the farm. But then he said something that made my heart stop. "Ethan, have you ever wondered why I've always been different with you? Why I've always seen you when no one else did?" I looked at him, confused. His eyes held something I hadn't seen before. Not just love, but guilt. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn envelope. It was yellowed with age and sealed carefully. "I was going to wait," he said, "but I think tonight's the right time." He slid it across the table toward me. "Open it, but before you do, promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that no matter what's inside, you won't question your worth. You'll remember everything you've built on your own, everything you've become." I stared at the envelope like it was alive. My fingers trembled as I peeled it open. Inside was a photograph, a letter, and a business card. The photograph was of a woman in her 20s, blonde hair, bright smile, and eyes. My eyes. "Who is she?" I whispered. "Her name," Grandpa said quietly, "is Caroline, and she's your birth mother." That moment felt like time stopped. My vision blurred. My heart raced. "You told me I was adopted by Robert and Elaine." "You were," Grandpa said, "but not the way you think." He leaned back in his chair, letting out a heavy breath. "Let me tell you the truth, Ethan. All of it." The candlelight flickered between us, casting shadows over Grandpa's weathered face as he began to speak. Caroline was just a girl when I met her, bright, driven, but broken by her family. She got pregnant when she was 19. The father ran off. Her parents kicked her out. She had no one except me. He paused, his eyes distant, lost in memory. "She came to me because I'd driven her father years ago. I was just the help, but she remembered I'd once brought her soup when she was sick. She said I was the only person in her life who ever showed her kindness. I clutched the photo tightly. My hands shook. She gave birth alone in a small clinic. No money, no support, just a suitcase and a baby. My heart pounded so loud I couldn't hear the clinking of glasses or laughter from nearby tables. It was just Grandpa's voice and the truth unraveling before me. She begged me to find you a safe home, Grandpa continued. Said she needed time, wanted to build a life, get stable. She wanted you back one day, but she didn't trust anyone. So you gave me to Robert and Elaine. They were my son and daughter-in-law. They'd been trying to have a child for years. I thought they'd raise you with love, that they'd treat you like their own. I made them promise. He looked down, but I was wrong, Ethan. I watched them fail you. And I kept quiet, because I thought maybe it would get better. I see now that silence was my greatest mistake. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My whole world, every hurt, every question, every Thanksgiving I spent wondering why I didn't belong, suddenly made sense. Grandpa slid the letter across the table. Carolyn left this for you. She's been searching for you for years. When she found me, I asked her to wait until the time was right. I think tonight it is. I opened the letter slowly. It was handwritten. The paper smelled faintly of lavender. Dear Ethan, it began. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but if you are, please know, I never stopped thinking about you. Not a single day. I loved you enough to let you go so you could live a life better than I could give. I've built a new life. I'm in Seattle now, and if you ever want to meet me, I'll be waiting. With all my love, Carolyn. My throat tightened. My eyes burned. She hadn't forgotten me. She'd never stopped searching. I looked at Grandpa. Why now? I asked. Why tell me all of this now? Because you've proven something to yourself, he said. That you're not just someone's son, you're someone's choice. You deserve to know your story, not the one the Bennetts let you believe, the real one. I nodded, 1,000 thoughts swirling. I felt grief, fury, relief, hope, but above all I felt something I hadn't in years, clarity. That night, after Grandpa and I left the restaurant, we walked the quiet streets of downtown Omaha in silence. The holiday lights twinkled in shop windows, but they felt distant, like echoes from a life I'd never been invited to. The cold bit at my cheeks, but I didn't feel it. All I felt was the letter in my pocket, and the weight it carried. Caroline, my mother. A woman I never met, but who never stopped looking for me. We arrived back at my apartment, and Grandpa settled into his usual spot on the worn-out recliner, the same one he insisted was perfectly broken in. He cradled a mug of tea while I sat on the couch, turning the letter over in my hands for the 100th time. What do I do now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Grandpa took a long sip before answering. You already know what to do, Ethan. You just need to give yourself permission. I stared at the business card Caroline had included, her name printed in clean, elegant font. Caroline Dalton, founder and CEO, Dalton Wellness Group, Seattle, WA. Seattle. It felt a world away, but also like the beginning of something real. The next morning I called her. My hands trembled as I tapped the number. Each ring felt like an hour. When she answered, her voice was soft, cautious. Hello, Caroline? I asked. This is Ethan. There was a pause, just breath on the line. Then I heard a sound I hadn't expected. A sob. Oh my God, she whispered. Is it really you? Yeah, I said, my voice catching. It's me. We didn't speak much after that, just planned a time, a place. She wanted to meet me at a quiet cafe near Pike Place Market. I said I'd fly out in a few days. When I hung up, Grandpa smiled. I'll come with you, he said without hesitation. We started this story together. Let's see it through. The morning of our flight, I packed light, just a duffel bag and a folder with the letter, the photograph, and all the courage I could muster. As the plane lifted off, I looked down at Omaha, the city that raised me but never really held me, and I whispered to myself, I'm not going back the same. Seattle was wet, grey, and breathtaking. The clouds hung low over the skyline, brushing the tops of buildings like an artist softening strokes on a canvas. As Grandpa and I stepped out of the airport, the crisp air filled my lungs like a new beginning. We checked into a modest hotel downtown, just a few blocks from Pike Place Market. Neither of us spoke much. Grandpa busied himself with unpacking, polishing his old shoes, and muttering about how hotel coffee was too fancy to be drinkable. But I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd look like, how she'd speak, Would her voice crack when she said my name? Would I recognize something in her face, in myself? At 2:58 p.m., I stood outside the cafe, hands stuffed in my jacket pockets, heart racing like I was back in the schoolyard, awaiting a test I hadn't studied for. Grandpa stood beside me, a calming presence, his hand on my shoulder. "Whatever happens in there," he said softly, "you don't need to carry anyone else's guilt. Not hers, not mine. This moment, it's yours." At exactly 3 p.m., the cafe door opened with a gentle chime. A woman stepped in, tall, poised, her blonde hair swept into a low bun. She wore a navy coat, simple gold earrings, and glasses that framed blue eyes. I knew too well. Our eyes met. She froze. Then slowly, she walked toward me, her heels tapping softly on the wood floor, as if unsure whether each step would hold her weight. I stood. She looked at my face, then her gaze dropped to my hand, the faint teardrop-shaped birthmark on my knuckle, and her breath caught. "Ethan," she said, as if the name itself were sacred. You look so much like I imagined, more than I hoped." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Every cell in my body was frozen between past and present. Then she did something that broke me wide open. She stepped forward and hugged me, not tight, not rushed, a gentle trembling embrace, like she was holding something fragile she thought she'd lost forever. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I am so sorry." We sat at a quiet table near the window. Grandpa watched from a nearby seat but gave us space. Caroline held her coffee cup like it was keeping her grounded. Her eyes never left mine. "I wanted to write you 1,000 times, she said, but every letter felt too small for what I needed to say. "Then say it now," I replied, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded. She nodded, tears brimming. "I was scared. I was alone. My family abandoned me, and the man I thought loved me, he ran. When you were born, I had nothing. No job, no home, just a baby I couldn't care for." "So you gave me away," I said, not accusing, just stating the truth. "No," she said quickly, eyes wide. "I gave you to the one person I trusted. Henry promised me he'd find you a home. I hoped, that family would love you like their own. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd come back for you once I was stable. But you didn't, because I was ashamed," she whispered. "By the time I had a real job, a home, a name people respected, I was terrified. What if you hated me? What if I'd already ruined your life?" Tears blurred my vision. I didn't know what I felt. Anger, sadness, relief, but mostly, I felt seen. Finally, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a silver locket. "This was yours," she said. "I kept it all these years. I wore it every time I spoke about you, thought about you, hoped for you." She opened it. Inside was a faded photo of me as a baby, and another of her, barely older than a teenager, holding me in a hospital gown. "I never stopped loving you, Ethan, even when I stopped believing I deserved to." I reached out and took the locket, and I held it like a bridge between two broken worlds, one I had survived, and one I might finally belong to. That night, Caroline invited Grandpa and me to her apartment. It wasn't just a place, it was a statement. A glass-wrapped penthouse high above Seattle, overlooking Elliott Bay, filled with quiet elegance. White walls lined with modern art, shelves of books, a warm light in every corner. It smelled faintly of cedar and vanilla. Not cold, not distant. It felt like home. We sat on a plush sectional by the window, sipping tea while rain painted the glass. Caroline sat across from me, her legs crossed, hands folded nervously in her lap. "I know I can't undo the years," she said softly, "but if you'll let me, I'd like to try." "Try what?" "Being your mother, however late it is." Her voice cracked at the word mother. She wasn't pretending to be something she wasn't. She was simply offering a place, not to rewrite history, but to start a new chapter. The next morning, I woke up in the guest room of her apartment. I stood at the window in silence, watching ferries glide across the bay. Then Grandpa knocked and entered, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You slept like a rock," he chuckled, handing me one. "First good sleep I've had in weeks." We sat together, quietly sipping. Then I asked, "What do I do now?" "You do what you've always done, Ethan," he said. "You build, one brick at a time. But this time, maybe you don't have to build alone." Caroline offered me a position at her company, Dalton Wellness Group. "Not a favor," she said. "A challenge, an invitation. You start like everyone else," she told me. No shortcuts. No special treatment. I smiled. Good, that's the only way I'd want it. And that's how it began. Not a reunion wrapped in a bow, but a quiet, intentional becoming. 2 months later, I moved into a modest apartment just a few blocks from Caroline's. Grandpa sold his farm and bought a condo nearby, complete with a small rooftop garden he tended like it was sacred land. We had Sunday dinners together. Caroline always made too much food. Grandpa always played his guitar after dessert. Sometimes we laughed so hard it startled the neighbors. Other times we sat in silence that didn't feel empty but full, of forgiveness, of rebuilding, of family. I didn't think much about Robert and Elaine anymore. They'd become shadows, people who raised me but never really saw me. But I did send one final letter. Not bitter, not demanding, just truth. Thank you for giving me a roof, I wrote. But I've found a home now, one that doesn't require me to earn my worth. I wish you peace. I just no longer need your permission to live fully. Ethan. 1 year later, the leaves began to fall again. Seattle's sidewalks shimmered with golden orange as Thanksgiving approached. But this time, I wasn't the one making desperate calls, begging for a seat at someone else's table. This time, I was the host. Caroline and I prepared everything together. She cooked with precision. Her stuffing was perfectly seasoned, her cranberry sauce homemade. Grandpa insisted on making the sweet potatoes the old-fashioned way, and hummed folk tunes while stirring the pot. And me, I stood at the stove, apron on, smiling like a man who had finally come home to himself. The table was set for 6, not out of tradition, but because it felt complete. There was no seat for Robert, no chair waiting for Elaine. This wasn't a table of obligation, it was a table of choice. A few of my co-workers from Dalton Wellness came by, people who now called me friend. Grandpa carved the turkey like a ceremony. Caroline lit candles and placed her old silver locket in the center of the table. Our quiet symbol that time, though lost, could still be found again. After dinner, we sat around the fire sipping cider while Grandpa played a soft melody on his guitar. Caroline rested her head gently on my shoulder. I never thought I'd get this back, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Neither did I replied. Outside, Seattle shimmered, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't standing behind a door waiting to be invited in. I was the door. I had opened it for myself. In the months that followed, I rose at Dalton Wellness not through favors but through effort. Caroline remained a mother, supportive but never overpowering. Grandpa, though slower now, never missed a Sunday dinner, and I finally started playing guitar again, the way he taught me on those hot summer days at the farm. The attic room in Omaha is a memory, the empty chair at the restaurant a scar, but scars fade, and healing, real healing, leaves something stronger in their place. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you don't have to stay where you're not seen. You don't have to keep chasing love that's withheld. Sometimes, your family isn't the one that raised you, it's the one that finds you when you're broken and chooses to stay. So this is for anyone who's eaten alone, for anyone who's felt unwanted, for anyone who's waited for someone to call them home. You are not alone, you are not broken, you are not forgotten. My name is Ethan. I found my family, I found myself, and I finally found peace.